Efed podcast, the podcast exploring our fantasy wrestling hobby, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real. I'm your host, Mikey Unlikely, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here on the Atomic Dropcast Network. Welcome back to another edition of Efed podcast. I'm excited to have you in for episode 58. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening. Guys, today on the show, we've got Brock. Brock's the handler of characters like Claybird, Tokenweed, and Rush. He's been in feds like EWC, the FWO, Jolt, and LOC, and Defiance as of recently. I'm excited to have Brock on to talk about his long career in Efedding and what he's doing today. We've also got a question of the week and much, much more. And we've got the Efed Spotlight as well. And just to clear it up, this is the last episode of the season. Brian and I are going to take a little holiday break after this, and we'll be back in January with more Efed interviews. We've been going strong for 58 episodes, I think with only 2 weeks off. So we're going to take a little vacay and spend some time with the family and do that thing, and then we'll be back raring and ready to go in January. We've got a whole slew of 50 more guests already scheduled for the show. I'm excited to get to the next season of the Efed podcast with you. In the meantime, don't forget to check us out on Twitter at the Efed Podcast. Of course, you can find us on Patreon over at patreon.com/Efed Podcast. This is a free podcast dropping every Tuesday, but if you'd like to support the show, we'd greatly appreciate it over there on our Patreon, patreon.com/Efed Podcast. And don't forget to check out efedtees.com, your number one source for Efed merchandise. If you want to get a custom t-shirt for your superstar, tag team, stable, or Fed, check out ewtees.com. You can also find us at efedtees.com as well. We've got hoodies now that it's cold. We've got all kinds of different options. Check it out, efedtees.com. All right, guys, let's get on with the show. But before we do, here's a word from our sponsors.
Occupy Pro Wrestling, putting the smart back into smart mark since 2012 as we grapple with design and media services for wrestlers, promotions, and podcasters. We strive to enjoy pro wrestling in our community and podcast, centered around interviews with wrestlers and fans alike. If you like what you see and hear, check out the central hub for everything we're doing and the latest from our site partners over at occupyprowrestling.com.
All right, guys, the Efed podcast is very happy to announce its brand new partnership over on Facebook with the Social Media Wrestling Association. The Social Media Wrestling Association, along with its 16,000 member strong influence page known as Generational Wrestling Society, has proven to be the true revolutionary Efed company of Facebook. The SWA welcomes written, video, and audio promos for its talent, as well as results provided in live 2K audio commentary and written results. The SWA is more than just an Efed. With GWS, all areas of the wrestling community are covered. From belt collectors, wrestling news, trivia, and podcasts, and Efeds. Check them out on Facebook at Social Media Wrestling Association and Generational Wrestling Society. You can give a search for both. Once you join both, you'll be glad to become associated with the society. And we're going to be posting our show on Facebook exclusively on the SWA and GWS sites. And we're very happy to have announced this partnership with the SWA, and you can hear about it here every week. So guys, go check them out. Social Media Wrestling Association on Facebook.
Defiance, an angle fed boasting 8 years of continuous fantasy wrestling. Defiance offers opportunities for original characters, micros, a standalone website utilizing Backstage 3 script, and a forum hosted on the long-running fwrestling.com, as well as a roster full of some of the most experienced writers in the game. Come see for yourself at defiancewrestling.com. That's defiancewrestling.com.
Hey guys, are you digging this podcast? Well, we really appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you check out my other podcast. The Atomic Dropcast is a look back at the wrestling of yesteryear through adult eyes. We watch the wrestling that we watched as kids, as adults, with a couple of beers in our hands. It's a great time. Check it out over at atomicdropcast.com. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
OCW Efed is a hybrid pro wrestling Efed that combines elements of roleplay and competitive play using the WWE 2K franchise. Whether you're on PlayStation or Xbox, OCW Efed is a creative outlet for gamers and pro wrestling fans alike. With over 16 years experience producing weekly content and live Twitch events, OCW Efed has a thriving community with handlers from all over the world. If this sounds like your cup of tea, come check us out at OCWFed.com, OCW Fed TV on YouTube, and OCW Fed on Twitch. It's like D&D for wrestling nerds.
Hey everybody, it's Mikey. No, we're not back to the show just yet. First, I want to tell you about my Patreon. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh no, am I going to have to pay for the podcast? No. The answer is emphatically no. The show has been and forever will be free. No, Brunk, you will not have to pay for the podcast. However, we have been asked by a handful of people how they can help support the show. And we've also been asked, mostly by Fuzz, why we didn't have a Patreon yet. And I quote, "You stupid I can't believe you don't have a Patreon. I will hurt you if you don't take my money now." End quote. That was Fuzz. He's a scary dude. So with that in mind, you can find us at patreon.com/efedpodcast. Contributions start as low as $3 a month. Thank you very much for your consideration. Please get Fuzz off our backs. The Efed question of the week is brought to you by the EWC. The Extreme Wrestling Corporation is the game's longest-running roleplay Efed, having been established in 1997. With over 100 active role players across 4 unique brands, the EWC offers opt-in booking on all of its bi-weekly shows. It's home to Stranglemania and the 4-day wrestling festival known as WrestleFest. The EWC is built on its welcoming community with zero bias and no drama. All styles are welcome. Come check out the EWC today at EWC4life.com. That's EWC, the number 4, life.com. And this week's Efed podcast question of the week: what is your wrestler's favorite gimmick match? It can be a match, style, or a stipulation. Drop your answers in the comments and we're going to read them on the air. Here we go. From the answer, JC, submission, because a big bruiser like JC always enjoys surprising people by showing his wrestling acumen. At Armenian Beast, King of the Hill, a stable versus stable match where the only way to win is to remove all members of the opposing stable from the ring. No pinfalls, no submissions. Did I mention that Beastie has a stable of 1? At MVW Heartland, last December we did a Nakatomi Towers death match because it was Christmas, damn it. I still contest Die Hard is a Christmas movie. At Claire RBGTL, meat locker match where you beat your opponent by smashing their face in with frozen animal carcasses. Winner gets to keep the carcass, better than a title belt because you can eat those. True that. At Whammy Bar, street fight, anything goes, falls count anywhere. Just about anything you can find as a weapon. My character's first official title was a hardcore title. That style has carried over to him in various places. At the Sam Tolson, Ye Old Ladder Match. At Only Star DEF, steel cage, old school chain link fence with a roof. Where the goal is not to escape, I assume. It's to beat the bloody hell out of someone. At Diablo Blanco PW, backyard match, brother. Give me some trampolines, a couple plywood boards, Home Depot ladder, light tubes, and a little fire, and LD is ready to jump off your mother's roof. At Akira Azumi, at AWA_Akira Azumi. Falls count anywhere matches. They allow total freedom. At Distorted Amber, street fight or parking lot brawl. Something down and dirty, all about throwing hands and outlasting a desperate opponent. At JVD Rooster, the Iron Man match. Seems counterproductive that some older wrestler would want to go 30, 60, or 90 minutes, but many wrestlers are flash and spot wrestlers who have 10 to 15 minute matches. Jan prides himself on endurance and technical skill to counter strength and speed. At Blade and Nico, deathmatch. Fair enough. Simple. At Bane_Mac, Doomsday Massacre match. Tables wrapped in barbed wire then set on fire. Just put them through it after it's been lit. At Failed Rhetoric, to watch, bra and panties. To compete, 2 out of 3 falls. Nice. Let's see what we got over on the Discord side of things. At The Troll Guy, Mariano was grown fond of Rumbles. He's won 3 of them in the past, in 4CW, Mainstream, and Revolution. Each of them saw him declared #1 contender for the promotion's main titles. He would later go on to win 2 of them as a result of these victories. At Top 100 nominee ×2, Brittany likes hardcore, street fight, and Falls Count Anywhere matches. At Cat Passidy, Cassidy's favorite gimmick match will be revealed at Death Road 21. No spoilers. Oh shit. And Dr. Reform's favorite gimmick match is an empty arena match. No obnoxious fans in his ear the whole time. Well, I think every match is an empty arena match these days, brother. At MDG, I made a blind faith match, which was a cage match with cells that contained allies, the opponent's allies, or weapons in them. The wrestler would hit a button and one cell opened, you just didn't know which one. So convoluted, so much Warren. Sounds just like you, buddy. At Alias, Alias's favorite match type is any match where people don't be mean to him. At the Matt Loaf, my Stacey Jones and Becca McGuire and Killer Carter characters prefer just straight up wrestling matches, as they're all about being able to show off their wrestling skills. Nate Nitro prefers hardcore matches, and as for the Covenant tag team, as long as they can cause pain and suffering, that's all they care about. At the Keystone State Killer, Chris Ross, gotta go with the old-fashioned street fight. No rules, no ref, no real way to even win. Just come out and beat the living fuck out of each other. Simple as that. At Seth is Burns, 2 out of 3 falls, no DQ, falls count anywhere, Royal Rumble. The latter to watch or read, but not to write. Yeah, true that. Some of these matches get crazy hard to write. At That Masked Guy, Texas Deathmatch, it's the perfect match to end a feud with, in my opinion. At TW Combat, John Thompson prefers a good old-fashioned one-on-one singles match. He's still just a rookie, though. Guys, thanks for participating in this week's Efed podcast question of the week. Watch out for the Twitter machine. During the break, we're still going to post a question of the week. And that way we've got a couple tanked up. Maybe we'll do some GIF ones so you can post your favorite finisher or tag move or whatever. We'll figure it out. In the meantime, we'll be back soon with the Efed podcast question of the week that you can answer so that it will appear on the show. We appreciate your participation in 2020.
Hey, this is Sean Jackson, and you're listening to the Efed podcast.
All right, everybody, it's time for the Efed Spotlight segment. This is a segment where we highlight a Fed that's out there, take a look at some details about them, and let you know just in case you want to check them out and maybe add them to your Feds that you rep. This week on the show, we've got California Sports Club. You can find them on Twitter at Cali Sports Club, or online at calisports.freeforums.net. They are an angle Fed with participation through Twitter, segments, and pitching ideas, and occasionally CD pieces. They have shows weekly with super shows every 6 to 8 weeks. They have standard angle Fed rules. All results are summarized. With 2 top-tier titles, the North American and the Pacific title, they also have a weekly contested television championship. Some of the wrestlers on their rosters include Terry Hawking, Melody, Journeyman Phillips, Jack Danielson, Estrella Rodriguez, Patty Rose, Patty Masterson, Janessa Sweet, Ryan Samuels, and Kanaka Moana. They currently have about 16 roster members and are looking to add people to their ranks. They have weekly events with summarized results, little commitment, and very storyline driven. So if you're looking for something casual, something fun, California Sports Club might be the Fed for you. Check them out again on Twitter at Cali Sports Club or online calisports.freeforums.net. another edition of the Efed Podcast interviews series. Today I'm joined by Brock. He's the handler behind characters like Claybird, Tokenweed, and Rush. If you may know him, if you ran with him over in feds like EWC, the FWO, Jolt, and LOC. Excited to have him on. Brock, my fellow Ohioan, how you doing, buddy?
Good, man. How are you?
Doing good. Excited to have you on. The last interview of 2020. How does it feel?
Awesome, man. I like the holiday edition or something.
Yeah, basically. We're going to drop right around Christmas, so that's nice.
We got to sing Christmas carols and stuff then, right?
Oh, or I'll be the Scrooge. We'll see how, or the Grinch, yeah. No, it's it's a good time of year, and we're excited to finally have you on. I know we kind of started talking over in the EWC Discord, and you jumped over into mine as well, and we've been hanging out and talking since. Almost got together earlier this year before COVID wrecked everything. Yeah,
thank you, COVID. You kept me from meeting Mikey. I appreciate it. That was good looking out.
Damn. No, but it was I'm glad we got you on, and I'm excited to talk to you about your history in the game. So let's start with how you got into professional wrestling. When did you become a fan?
So I basically, being born in the 80s, I was basically born a fan. Hulk Hogan was everywhere.
Yes.
Growing up like in Ohio and near Pittsburgh. So I didn't really have a choice. Rock and wrestling was on. All that was on all the time. I had a little Hulk Hogan doll from when I was a kid. My dad was like kind of into wrestling, but not super into it, like enough to humor me as a kid. So we had a good time. It was pretty cool. Like that era, like the stories were terrible, the gimmicks were awful, but Hulk Hogan was awesome. So that's all I really had to worry about. And then, just being a fan in general.
So a little Hulkamaniac at first. It's hard not to like him as a kid because he just says the right things. He's the quintessential superhero.
Yeah, man. I took my Hulk Hogan vitamins. Like, I still might pop one.
You still got some. They expired in 1992, but we still got them.
Don't worry. They're fine. It says right on them, say your prayers, take your vitamins. I just do what he says.
That makes sense. Well, good deal. So who else besides Hulk Hogan? I mean, obviously, as you got older, did you go to WCW with Hulk, or did you stay in WWF?
So I stayed in WWF, and then the NWO happened, which made Hulk Hogan way cool again.
Yes.
And while I was in WWF, I was like a big Kevin Nash fan because I was like always a bigger kid. So that was like one of like the dreams was whenever they all got together and did the NWO thing. It was just like, oh, my two favorites are on TV together, and this is awesome.
That's that. What are the odds?
Yeah.
When they were just on different channels.
Yeah, exactly. And like the NWO invasion thing, like seeing Scott Hall on WCW was just like mind blowing as a kid. So I watched WCW up until I think like really up until Mick Foley won the title in WWF.
Wow.
Because I have friends who went to the Hell in a Cell match where Undertaker throws Foley off the cage, and like all my friends were giant WWF fans after that. So I basically kind of tilted back that way.
Yeah, it's hard not to when you see Mick flying off there, and then he wins the world title, and it's a great story. And Tony Schiavone tells you to turn the channel, basically.
yeah. It was like, oh, thanks, man. Thanks for the
good shout.
I appreciate it.
So you were a Nitro fan forever. So big into the cruiserweights and stuff like that.
Honestly, like as a kid, not really. It was just more. All I cared about was the NWO stuff.
Yeah, NWO. You got the Giant. You got all kinds of crazy stuff going on.
Yeah, I was like 10, 11, 12. So that was way more important than watching Rey Mysterio flip around like a crazy person. I mean, it was pretty awesome whenever Kevin Nash threw him like a lawn dart.
Yeah.
But that was kind of where I learned to love heels and really kind of took that and ran with it for a long time. Like all my favorite characters after that are like Jericho and stuff, great workers. So that's where I learned to love it.
So after the NWO, you get into Jericho when he's in WWF, I assume.
Yeah, yeah. And then I stopped watching wrestling because wrestling started to suck.
Yeah.
And at some point in there, I started watching. There's a group that guys that were on like IRC chats that would trade Poro videos.
Okay.
And I got into like a lot of the All Japan stuff. I watched a lot of that because it was pretty amazing, like Misawa and Kobashi. And that was pretty cool to watch because I hadn't seen a lot of that style, having watched Hogan my whole life.
Yeah, no doubt.
So that was amazing. And
Are you telling me Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash weren't working that style?
Yeah, I don't think they were. I just don't think they had it in them. But so I really liked that. And then All Japan went to Noah. Noah was great for a little while. And then Misawa gets old. Misawa dies. Kobashi's like 110 at that point. Kenta and Marufuji they're good, but the rest of the promotion like really sucks. So I just really stopped watching wrestling altogether.
But you said you were tape trading during that time.
It was more download trading. So like we
would,
like in IRC channels, like you would kind of list what you had, and everybody else would list what they had, and you would just direct connect with people and trade videos.
That's sweet. So after you said you stopped watching wrestling, what about later on? Did you get back into it, or do you watch it today?
So I got back into wrestling probably 20. It was Omega versus Okada in the Tokyo Dome.
Okay.
My brother actually got back into wrestling, and he messaged me. He's like, "Hey, you got to see this." He knew I'd always watched the the All Japan stuff, and knew I really liked that style. So he tells me I have to watch Kenny Omega and Okada. So I stay up till 5 a.m. watching Wrestle Kingdom with him. We were hanging out on Skype, just watching the whole show. And yeah, it was like New Japan kind of reinvigorated me. Really followed along pretty hard up until the whole AEW thing happened. And now, honestly, like I just don't really care to watch it that much anymore. I'll watch it, but...
Yeah, no, I get it. Everybody goes through those phases where they come in and out of wrestling, so just depends on what's on and what you like.
Yeah, I was in long enough to like buy a Bullet Club t-shirt and stuff, so that's great.
There you go. So let's talk about e-wrestling. How did you find the weird world of e-wrestling?
So it was 1998. Wrestling was kind of at like this mega height, and my family in rural Ohio gets their first computer.
Nice.
And we had a terrible... The internet options were awful. So we had like AOL, and we had to pay long distance to call out on our 56K modem. And so I wasn't really allowed on the internet that much because it was long distance. But we ended up getting a local provider eventually, and that was like middle of 98. Like finally a local provider came into our rural area, and I just started, fantasy baseball and fantasy football. Like I always loved sports as a kid. So I'm like, oh, there has to be a way to like pick wrestlers and do this like fantasy wrestling thing, right? So go to yahoo.com because that's the search engine at the time, and Yahoo up some fantasy wrestling sites.
And this is what you found instead.
Yeah, this is what I found instead. Totally wasn't what I was looking for at all. But it was pretty cool. Like I was reading, like I read some of the stuff some of the guys wrote, and I was like, I can definitely do this. And my name's Brock, so I had this sweet character name. It was going to be The Brock. It was, it's my worst character name, which is like considering all my other character names, it's pretty hard to top already. Like I got some pretty terrible names already, and that one just takes the cake. But
that's a pretty good one, yeah.
Yeah, I was the Brock for like 6 months, and like I bounced around like everywhere on Angel Fire, like. Because once you found like Angel Fire, you could search just Angel Fire for fantasy wrestling. So
I laugh because I remember this.
So I find this place called the DWO, and the DWOs is like arranged kind of like the NWA territories were.
Okay.
Which is pretty awesome. And they had like these like divisions, like DWO Texas was like the place they sent all the jobbers, and you had your jobber matches versus each other, and you worked your way up through the territories. And I got to the second territory, and I was really good in the second territory. I thought I was. I was awful, but I was good there. And they told me that I couldn't move up any farther because the Brock was a terrible name. I kind of left there. I found this crazy site called FWLnet.com, which was like one of the first EW resource sites, and they had a top 100 list.
Ooh, the infamous top 100s. I've heard those lists make a lot of people happy.
Yeah, exactly. Their top 100 list, I don't know how it worked. I have no idea, but there were like a zillion feds on there. But it was really cool because you could go there and see like 1.5 million feds.
Yeah.
So I scroll through there and I click on this thing called Get in the Ring. And I thought it was an Efed. And once again, I was tricked. And it was basically like an IRC chat wrestling client, which was really weird. But it was like a fun game to play. And everybody there had found it the same way, basically. Like we were looking for Efeds and we clicked the wrong link. But so I met a couple cool dudes there. One of them, this kid named John, he handled a character Sin, typical 90s awful name.
Yes.
And then
of course.
This other kid named Tom, he handled this character Cage. We all lied to each other and told each other we were like 17 when we were really 14. Stereotypical being
Efed stuff,
13. Yeah, exactly at that point. And John was really into like actually e-wrestling. And he was a good buddy. We talked all the time. He told me to go read his stuff. So I would. And he asked me to join this Fed with him, and because he wanted to make a stable. So I said, okay, I can do that. And I wanted to make a stoner character because I thought stoners were funny, like Half Baked had just come out.
Yeah.
So I named the character Token Weed, which was terrible, but
clever.
We
Very
ran
clever.
with it. Very clever, yeah, exactly. Thank you for the props. It's not deserved. So I named the character Token Weed, and it's like a surfer, stoner, hippie character. And the AWA is ran by some guy named David Parker, who he was around till I think the mid 2000s, and he ran a couple of RP God tournaments, is what they were called, but they had like cash prizes.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that was pretty cool. But he's kind of like a weird dude. But he joins this thing called Fed Wars. And I think Ben Halcomb owned Fed Wars at one point, but this is way, way, way before that. And we joined Fed Wars, and our stable is called the Ideal Four, and there's 4 guys like Sin, Rico Suave, Vinny Catante, and Token Weed. These guys' names.
Quite the collection.
Yeah, well, Vinny was awesome because Vinny had figured out how to use Poser and so he was amazing, and we made Poser images for all our wrestlers, which were terrible. They didn't even have textures on them. But
at the time it was the first Poser pictures.
Yeah, I didn't know he knew about the FWO and all that stuff, but he had he experimented with this and made us these little characters, and it was cool. And we became really popular because we had Poser images. It's kind of like a story of the hobby for a long time. Was whoever had the best posers won.
Yes.
And we had them. So we won. But Fed Wars was cool. And we left. We ended up leaving AWA because David Parker's a shithead. And we joined.
Just slide that in there.
Yeah, no problem. Just let me torch someone real quick. Get that out of the way. So we joined this Fed called Just Electrifying Wrestling.
Oh.
Which sounds like a really cool name, but the acronym's awful.
Oh.
But Just Electrifying Wrestling is ran by this guy named Sebastian, who ran a Fed much later on called Prime.
Yes, familiar with Prime.
So this is Sebastian's first Fed ever. So we're there. Fed Wars, they do these inter-Fed matches and stuff. And we were the hottest thing. The Ideal Four was the shit. And this Fed called PCW, Primetime Championship Wrestling, joined Fed Wars. And that's the Ron, the Phantom Booker, ran PCW. And it's basically the first Fed all the PTC stuff came from.
Oh, nice.
So Ron joins, and he's, really promotes his guys, does a really good job, and sets us up for this Stable Wars match where we're going to go against a stable in his Fed. it was really cool. Like, I role played like 27 times for this match.
I remember those days.
Yeah. And I realized really quickly that all the other guys in the stable didn't role play. So I lost, and it like really pissed me off.
Well, they wouldn't have to if you were writing 27 of them.
Yeah, exactly. But the reason I lost was because they didn't role play at all. Which, you know, that's what I try to tell myself. The guys in PCW were just way fucking better than we were. So I get like mad, and I decide I'm going to leave like the stable, and like those guys can go do their own thing. And I joined PCW. The whole time I told you about earlier on Get in the Ring, there was another kid named Tom. And the whole time I'm talking to Tom, and like Tom's doing something totally different. He's in these like different groups of feds, and we're like sharing each other's work. And he links me to a place like around this time called the CWL.
Okay.
This was like 2001. And the CWL blew my mind. It was amazing. Pete was there, like with Eli Flair. They had this character Zero, handled by Andy Bloxham, who's the guy's like low key one of the best writers ever. Like downright amazing. Like even if you read it now, you're like, wow, this guy was still really good. He was just on like this whole other level. And they had this character Douglas, who was really cool. They had all this history they built into the characters. So Douglas was like a part of the Fed from like way before, and they had fired him, and he was like this big legend guy. But he was like a jobber at that point. So they had this huge story. And I was like, wow, this is really neat. And Tom's like, yeah, I keep trying to get in here. You know, I got to join these other feds that are like this one, though, to get in there. So I'm in PCW. Those guys are way better than me, like I said. And they kick my ass a whole bunch. So I end up joining. Tom links me to this thing he's in called 5-Star Wrestling. And I joined there. And 5-Star Wrestling is kind of cool. And I'm still this surfer token weed guy at the time. But 5-Star Wrestling, like we weren't getting the exposure we wanted. So like we kept joining other feds, and we were in like 20 different feds at once or something crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. We meet Kenny Heckert. He runs this place called Omega Wrestling Alliance. And they have this character in Omega Wrestling Alliance called, I think it was Zero Levegrant. And the character's like a mute, and it was really cool to read. So we start talking to that guy. His name's Simon. We talk to him a lot, and he becomes, you know, pretty cool with us. And Tom and I are kind of running in the same circles. So we end up joining this place called Club. And Club's an underground fighting fed.
Okay.
And Club, at the time, this is like 2001, CWL had closed. Ed Wilson had passed away. I'm going to give a fuck David Tyrell here. I don't know if anybody listened to Pete's interview, but there's a tie back for you. Fuck David Tyrell. He ran around and like said like Ed was fake and Travis was Ed. He was an asshole. Fuck that guy. But so what happens? We join Club, and Club has some guys who were in CWL, so we're all like, oh, starstruck, like these guys are amazing. You know, I'm 15 at the time or whatever.
Yeah, but you're seeing people again that were at the top of the Fed when you were there.
Yeah, you know, like they were the jobber guys, but they were still in the Fed, so they know the other guys. But Club's around for like 3 or 4 weeks. But it's really important to me because it showed me there's like a darker place you could go in this hobby. And it was pretty cool.
I mean, it's almost like your first concept Fed. It's like, it's not just wrestling. It's not just lights and glitz and glamour.
Right. Yeah. It's an underground fighting place. Like you fight in like a hole, and like people gamble on your matches and stuff. It was pretty cool. But it's only around for 4 weeks. And it was a real fighting Fed. So at this point, I end up sending an email to a guy named Aaron the Relentless. Aaron the Relentless ran a place called Jolt. Jolt had a ton of characters from CWL in it.
Okay.
And it had a bunch of guys from FWO and a bunch of guys from this fed called Tornado Wrestling, which I never actually read, but apparently was kind of cool at one point. So Kodiak Vic Creed's there. This character, the Don, who's like a mafioso type character, but he was in CWL, so he wrote really well, is there. And I end up joining there, but they tell me I can't use my character Token Weed because I was in club.
Okay.
And it was a fighting character, not a wrestling character. So I make this character Rush, and I joined Joel. Joel was really cool. It had like the best Flash videos on the planet. Like it had some of the best art. Even now, like the videos would like blow you away. Every show had like a guy who'd come on and be like, well, this week on Sunday Intense, so-and-so versus so-and-so. And it would like, lightning would crash and everything was electric. It was really sweet and, you know, had a ton of good graphics. So everybody read our stuff. It sucked, but everybody read it because it looked cool.
Right. Yeah. It's all about presentation.
Yeah, exactly. Especially at this time. Like it's all about presentation. FWO is like this, you know, is really important fed and they have good posers. So everybody reads FWO. And they were doing like really good work at that point, but the original FWO didn't do good work.
It's crazy. It's crazy to think that there's this whole generation that peaked when we were like 12 to 15 years old that we're never going to remember their stuff because they were at the top of their game when we were just getting started.
Yeah. No, and some of those guys are even still around though. Like Kevin's still around, Flying Frenchie,
Mike Bell, yeah.
Mike. Some of those old heads hanging out.
That's right.
So Aaron was actually in FWO though. He got thrown out, right? So he has this like huge vendetta against FWO, and everything has to be better than FWO. So, you know, we're writing and like our shows are terrible. We have like a bunch of like FWO rejects, and then Kodiak Vic Creed, who is still in FWO somehow. I don't know how that worked out, but Kodiak Vic Creed was in like every fed ever at this point. Like a new fed would open and they would list KVC on the roster, like number one, like, hey, this is a real place. You can come join here. And I don't think
See, we've got a roster. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even think the guy knew he was in the feds. Like he might have just said yeah in like an AIM chat, and that was it.
And then never looked at it again, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like Don, I don't think ever was in half the places he thought he was, or people thought he was. So in Joel is whenever I kind of really learned to write. I started making a lot better friends. And we start talking to a couple, you know, different people. I end up start meeting Ford, like right when I'm in Jolt, because it just gives me that exposure. And at this point, like networking in eFeds was so important because that's how you could get in everywhere, because all the best feds didn't have applications.
They were invite only.
Yes. Yeah. Like FWO, no applications. The only time they ever had applications open, you had to go through Survivor to get in, which is a reality TV show game. Like it was like intense. Like we had all these challenges. They said they were only going to take one. They take like 6 or 7, but you know, that's how they filled their ranks, was they basically tested everybody beforehand.
It's crazy that this is episode 58, I think. And, as we record, I've listened to everybody talk about all the feds they were in for all these years. And I've heard of FWO a billion times, and I've heard CSWA a billion times, and I heard NEWA a billion times. But none of these feds I ever ran into or knew they existed until you mentioned Jolt. Jolt's one that I seen a million times when I was younger, and I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, it was a really cool place. And I wrote like 90% of the shows at Jolt. Because Aaron was lazy, but he was really good idea-wise, but he was lazy. So I decided I was going to take over recruitment because Aaron was lazy. And the IWO had just like went on hiatus, which was the FWLnet.com's like home fed. And the one Tom Ford like ran IML2, and it was like this huge, it was like the best roleplay fed in the world at the time. But it had like a bad reputation at the end. So I got Tom and Mike Renner in touch with Aaron and brought like a bunch of those guys over to kind of take some of my load off, because I was writing like 90% of the shows. There was another guy named Tomer Chen who he ran like the other big RP Fed, which was Dream Wrestling.
Yes.
Which had like Doozer and those guys in it.
Yep.
And Tomer was like the man behind the magic of Dream Wrestling. And nobody knew this. Tomer wasn't even in the Fed, but Tomer and I wrote all of Jolt's shows. So, and that was the thing. Like back then, it was all about the perspective of the story, and you had like real fans. Like it was the weirdest thing. But like now, like we all have to give each other feedback to have people read our work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but back in the day, there used to be people just checking out the website. I was one of them.
Yeah, there were people who just read the website, like read the stories, and on EW Planet, which was like the big community site, your show would get posted, and before you, like, no member of the Fed did it. Like some random person would post it and post feedback, and everybody would talk about the card. You'd have like 2 or 3 pages. FWO shows would have like 20, but Jolt would have, their 3 or 4 pages, and people would be like, "Oh, this is so much better than FWO," and Aaron would be so happy. But I got kind of tired of the comparison and we have to be better than FWO when we clearly weren't even in the ballpark. And I got tired of a guy who was running the place but wasn't really running the place.
Yep.
And wasn't really doing anything to run the place. Like after I left, I'm pretty sure Ford and Renner like ate the workload up, and that's just where it went to. And I ended up applying. It wasn't an application. I just emailed Joe at asylumfighting.com. I saw his email on a profile on another wrestling Fed's website. It was 21W, and I knew the owner's name was Joe. So in my head, this had to be the owner.
Okay.
And the Asylum was a pretty crazy. This is like 2001. Pete Borst was like the headliner there, and Pete Borst had been like, he was scheduled to go into CWL with like this crazy story. And on the last show was his debut show. So it's like half written, right? The last CWL show. And it was posted, so like you knew he was supposed to debut. But Pete was like originally from Asylum, and it was handled by this guy, Steve King, and the character was amazing. He was hilarious. And he had this war going on with this character in me. And Pete Borst got, I believe, like shot or thrown off a scaffold or something, and they said he was dead. And I said, holy shit, this is so cool. Like, people can die. Like, they acted like Borst was actually dead. So I wanted to join this place. Because I'm at this point, I'm like 15. And I'm like, yeah, this is definitely the place I want to be.
Yeah, they're killing people. I definitely want to join.
Well, and you think about the time, like, it's one of the things to think about. We're going to talk a lot about Asylum, I think. And at the time, the shows on TV, like the big shows, are like Sopranos, Oz, like these HBO shows that were just viciously violent and graphic. And I think that's where a lot of us kind of took inspiration from when we were in Asylum. So I joined Asylum with my fighting character, Token Weed, because he's a fighter now.
Yeah.
After being told he's not. And Token was no longer a hippie or a stoner character. He was now a drug dealer. And that fit in an Asylum. That was pretty normal. My first angle was selling heroin to a character who didn't actually use it to enhance his performance, because I guess heroin enhances your performance. I don't know. I was 14. I had no idea what heroin was. But I wrote the whole thing because the guy wasn't there. Like, he didn't do anything for the story, so I wrote the whole thing. And Joe, for some reason, saw a lot of, like, really liked my character and had me come in 3rd place in a match called Manhunt. And Manhunt was pretty crazy. It was like their Royal Rumble. And first place would get a title shot. Second place would get a TV title shot. Third place would get like a UK title shot, so on and so forth, all the belts.
Okay.
And I'd only been there like a month and a half. So this was like a real big deal for me.
You're already getting title shots, yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's angle fed, right? So like that meant that like he really liked my work. I was writing like role plays every day. And at least he knew I was active and I cared. And Asylum was kind of like the second Fed to FWO in that group, in that circle. So it was pretty awesome that like all of a sudden I would log on to AOL Instant Messenger, and where I used to log on and nobody would talk to me, or, you know, like my friends would message me and that's it. Now I log on and I have 20 people messaging me, hey, join my
It's that first feeling of recognition.
Yeah, it was cool. It was really cool. But then it got really old really fast because you're like,
yes.
Oh my God, I have to be invisible all the time. Like I have to message people and tell them I'm on. And we're all invisible. So you have to like,
hey, are you on? Yeah.
yeah, it was a nightmare. But it was a really cool place. And they were running probably one of my favorite stories in e-wrestling at the time. And I talked about that character Douglas earlier from CWO. Douglas was a washed up wrestler, and in his CWL past life, whenever he was, like early on in CWL, he killed the career of a wrestler named Kenny Rock.
Killed the career or killed the man?
No, killed the career. Wrecked his career. And Kenny Rock is out for vengeance, right? And that was the whole point of this story, was Kenny Rock wanted his vengeance on Douglas, and he was going to try to kill Douglas. And Kenny Rock ends up taking, they go through this huge story. Somehow Roland gets involved in the story because Kenny Rock needed a lawyer. And
LLB is available.
Yeah, LLB is available. He comes into Asylum at this point. And I met Roland there were these chat rooms that went on between like the FWO, the Asylum, and some of the Jolt guys that were called ill thought out chats, because we were all on Invisible, and they would run 24 hours a day, and we would just talk in there versus trying to talk with dealing with all the other people.
Because that way at least whoever's on will respond.
Yeah, exactly. And so I met Roland through that. And I was like blown away that LLB, because he was like the guy for Pinnacle of Insane Wrestling, was like involved in the story. And the story ended with Kenny Rock's vengeance. So the match happens, and Kenny Rock and Douglas go back and forth, and Kenny Rock realizes he's going to lose. He can't beat Douglas. So Kenny Rock pulls out a gun and blows his brains out. The line is, you destroy me, I destroy you, bang. And the shitstorm that happened on the forums was unreal.
I can only imagine.
Like, everybody's like, he's not really dead. This is an alternate ending. It's like worse than the Sopranos ending. Like, people are freaking out. And it puts a ton of focus on Asylum. Like, all of a sudden we go from like, everybody like reads a lot of our stuff to everybody reads everything. So I get to work with Kodiak Vic Creed there, who's actually there, which was pretty cool. Don's like,
versus just being on the roster.
Yeah, versus being on the roster and like having somebody like write a segment like, oh look, KVC's there, look. I get to work with KVC, and my character goes like really, really dark with Kodiak Vic Creed. He tries to deal Kodiak Vic Creed drugs. He tries to deal him steroids. Kodiak Vic Creed's like 6'5", 330 pounds of like absolute muscle. So obviously on roids, right? And Don was running a story at the time where his character was addicted to a substance called tar.
Okay.
And tar was why Vic Creed was so big and why he wrestled so well or fought so well. And that was his story. And I was trying to move in on his dealer and like be his dealer.
Gotcha.
But Vic Creed wouldn't buy off me. So Token ends up kidnapping Vic Creed's daughter. And they end up having like this crazy match it's like a ladder match, and it's a 3-fall match. And 2 of the falls, like one's for Vic Creed's daughter, one's for Vic Creed's girlfriend, and the other one's for the UK title. And the UK title's portion's a ladder match. Because I couldn't beat Kodiak Vic Creed. The character was just way too cool. Like, I couldn't legit beat him. So right. Kodiak Vic Creed beats the living hell out of Token Weed. Wins his daughter back, because you have to do that. Like, you can't just steal somebody's daughter.
Yeah, of course.
Wins his girlfriend back, because you have to do that. And Token wins the UK title by tying Vic Creed up in barbed wire, hitting him with a chair a bunch, and running up the ladder while Vic Creed struggles to get out. And then runs away, because he's terrified of this gigantic human being.
Well, yeah, smart play.
Yeah, exactly. The heel move, right? So I get myself over as a heel, which is pretty cool. And at this point, like, my writing's pretty over, and a lot of people in Asylum like want to work with me, which is awesome. And Jolt closed. Like, all this happens at the same time.
Okay.
And I end up messaging Ford, Renner, and I get them in touch with Joe, who runs the Asylum. And it basically becomes this place that I can bring my friends into whenever I want, because Ford, Renner, Roland, like every single guy I helped bring in was money. Like, they worked, they did a great job. So I could just bring all my friends in whenever I wanted. I mean, it's amazing.
They're all legends in the game, and Roland.
Yeah, well, Roland's a legend, man. You don't short sell. Listen, any character who can get over with the phrase objection, and then you can follow up with the phrase erection, is amazing. And that's Roland. Roland got that over.
I love Roland.
But how do you get erection over as like a counter chant? I don't. But Asylum was like real dark and twisted, and I was able to bring in Tom, who, I met 4 years ago playing Get in the Ring or whatever. And Tom came in with his character, Rave Caprino, and it was like, it stole my heat, stole my thunder, but it was amazing because I helped Tom out. Like, this character was awesome and ran off, like, took off it was like a light switch flipped. And he started feuding with our old friend Simon, who had changed his character's name to Willem Ender. Willem Ender was obsessed with Kenny Rock, which was pretty cool. And at the same time, I'm working with this guy named Azrael Ravenel, whose character's name who's handled by this guy named Dave. And Dave's the best writer of all time in the hobby. The guy was absolutely like lights out, incredible writing. And I'm literally a shit can compared to this dude, but he made us look great. So we have the 2 top feuds going on at the same time. And we get to the point where Dave and I are like at a point where we're going to do a fake death for a twist. Token's going to get shot and like fall off a building. And Azrael's going to think he won. And we do it on this show. And I'm like, wow, that came off great. Like, we're going to crush it. Like, I'm going to look at these forums tomorrow, and there's going to be so many people talking about this. Because that was like, it was shock. Like, we were just trying to be shock entertainment. And Simon and Tom, the very next match, do a rape angle between 2 men. So nobody ever talks about Token Weed getting shot off a roof of a building. Everybody talks about this rape angle.
Sure.
And Asylum's like, so like, we have the suicide, we have a murder early on, we have a suicide, and then we have the rape now. And it just continues to spiral downhill. Where we're all trying to one-up each other. And it's fantastic. No. But it led to some of the best storytelling. And if anybody's ever watched the show Oz, like that type of like graphicness, like people were always getting stabbed, people were always dying. People would literally write characters to kill them. Like, you'd write them for like 4 months to have them die. to get your to get another character more over. It was pretty cool. But Asylum, because we were so gritty and we were so different from FWO, like we were so far removed from what they were, which was traditional wrestling. A lot of the guys from the FWO started to come over. And they were still in FWO, but they just handled grittier, darker characters and told darker stories. Because really, when you're 17 and 18, like everybody goes through like kind of a phase where you're a little bit more morbid and you have more curiosities. And that's what we did there. That's basically what Asylum was a bunch of 15 to 18-year-old to 20-year-old dudes figuring out how to write out these crazy, morbid stories. But it got everybody learned who each other was, which was pretty awesome. And then Asylum, like FWO actually went on hiatus in spring of 2002. It was like spring or summer of 2002. FWO just goes on hiatus. And we're the number two Fed. So we quickly become the number one Fed. And all of a sudden there's all this focus on us. We built like this big following anyway, and the following just like tripled overnight. Like every show we posted was huge. And the interesting thing that happens is we start working with another Fed called 21 Wrestling, which kind of takes over FWO's niche as like the traditional wrestling promotion.
Okay. And you guys are kind of the violent ones.
Yeah, we're not violent, like we're fighting. So ours is real, theirs is fake, those type of storylines.
Gotcha.
But we start working together. Because Joe and Paul knew each other in real life. Paul was the owner of 21st Century Wrestling. And they ended up a lot of the FWO characters that still wanted to write while the FWO was on hiatus had joined 21W. So they ended up getting a big following real quick. And I think Travis actually designed 21W's site because the first one was so shit. Like it was like black and yellow, and Travis felt so bad for their color scheme. And like they had black, yellow, and red. It looked like Hulk Hogan like blew up on a screen. And Travis designs like all their shit. So they have great art. So everybody joins the great Fed with the great art, right? And we start working together on this story that is called Immortals. And Immortals is probably the coolest show ever written. It's probably the longest show I've ever seen, too. One of them. It's the two Feds go back and forth. Like they feud with each other for 2 months on each other's TV shows. Like the forums are going nuts for this shit. And we tell a story of Golden Glenn Miller, who is the 21st Century Wrestling's champion. And he's kind of like a Ric Flair knockoff. But he's like older than Ric Flair at that time old. He's like old Ric Flair, like 2009 old. And old Ric Flair, Golden Glenn Miller, has to wrestle 3 matches in one night at Immortals versus these crazy fighters, right? The first one, he wrestles a guy from 21st Century Wrestling for their title. He wins. He goes into this Survivor style match, which has the Iliad is what we called it. And it was like a Survivor Series match. Asylum only had 4 characters in it in the match scheduled. Everybody was like, oh, so 21W like auto wins. And my character like comes out of Token Weed, comes out of nowhere and kicks Golden Glenn Miller's head off. Which to win the match and like steal the win from 21st Century Wrestling, which is amazing. And so it like immediately elevates me into like kind of like this main event scene in Asylum. And then the other thing that happens on that show is Joe actually handled a character in 21W called Kellen Kincaid. And Kellen Kincaid was the guy Golden Glenn Miller wrestles at the start of the show. And the winner, like both Feds champions are supposed to fight at the end to determine who's the winner wrestling or fighting. It's a dumb story, like dumb premise, but a cool story. So Kincaid locks Golden Glenn Miller in a room, tells everybody Golden Glenn Miller can't perform, and goes out and sells out 21st Century Wrestling with a finger poke finish versus and this show is like enormous. Like you read, like it probably took you 2 hours to sit down to read this thing, and we ended it with a finger poke finish, which pissed everybody off.
Yeah.
Cade had more heat than God. Like, like he was the most hated character by far that year. Like it wasn't even close. And that's kind of when we start talking to FWO more, which is kind of interesting. FWO is like getting ready to come back from a hiatus, and I'm getting a little burnout on Asylum. Like I had just taken this main event role, but building that yourself up to that is kind of the fun part. Now it's like I'm just going to tell these stories with these guys. So we end up joining FWO. Like Joe sends an email to Travis. Travis says yes to Joe, and I send an email and I go too. And at the same time, we're running Asylum, but Rush joins FWO, which was pretty cool.
Okay.
It was a good time, but Asylum like has like this huge amount of heat still, and it was really fun there. I end up working. I'll finish Asylum first. I guess that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, let's wrap up Asylum.
In Asylum, Willem Ender, the character with the rape angle, who was later castrated. Well, I mean, after you rape a guy, like, what's that guy to do to get you back? Apparently, he castrates you.
That's the next logical step, I guess.
That's the escalation, right? So Willem Ender is like the champ. The guy who runs wild, feuds with like all these guys, like feuds with everybody. I stay away from him because I know like that story is for later, and we had to kind of work that out between the two of us. Like we shouldn't involve each other until probably the next year, because we were both kind of that main event level character, and there were only two of us, so it was better to have both of us at a high level than just one of us. So Simon eventually burns out because he's writing like a colossal amount. Some old FWO guys eventually invade TA as like Stranglehold, and we kind of do the whole wrestling versus fighting thing again. Ruben Ross shows up, which was a real big deal at the time, but Butch never really cared about Ruben Ross in Asylum.
That Fed.
Yeah. So, Butch handled a character called Steve Christ, which was Jesus' forgotten brother in Asylum.
Okay.
And it got really over, and he actually ends up Asylum champion when Simon leaves. And Butch was also the FWO champion at the same time, and like I don't think he could handle the workload. So we ended up dropping the title to Token, and that was kind of like the final moment for me there. It was like, oh, holy cow, I'm the most over person here. Like, this is a big deal. But I felt kind of like I was, like the champions who never draw a dime?
Yeah. The Diesel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought I was. Because I didn't have a ton of characters to work with. Like, we were bringing people in for me to work with. We were, like, on a decline. And it was pretty steep, right? Because FWO had reopened. We were writing there, too. And we were probably telling better stories than FWO. And Asylum was, like, on this downward trend. And the fans don't really realize that. Like, the people on the boards don't realize that. But everybody in there realizes it.
Yeah.
And we bring in, like, we have another Fed, like, take over a show because we couldn't get enough writers to write for it.
Ouch.
Like, we go to, it was actually a really cool show, which is great. But we get a PTC Fed, OSW, to lend us Ivan Stanislav, who, like, handled by this guy Hutch, who, it's a Russian character, and he has this, like, huge Russian stable. It's like old school, like 1980s stuff, like Ivan Koloff. He comes in and he writes. Hutch wrote the whole show, front to back. We have Token Weed versus Ivan Stanislav for Red Army Control, and we did 4 invasion angles because that was the thing at the time. And that's how bad our storytelling got, right? Like we had hit that point where we weren't telling great stories anymore.
You're just following what's on TV now.
Yeah, basically. And that's terrible. But Simon comes back right before right after Pain, which is our end of the year, like our big blow off event. And Simon's character comes back at Pain, challenges Token. We go, we feud for 4 months, and we end it Villamender versus Token Weed, which is, a story that hadn't happened and everybody wanted. So we kind of get a little bit of momentum for it, and we end that feud. I gave the belt back to Ender, basically. I give the belt back to Simon at that point. But Token and Ender, and the match ends. Token breaks both his arms and has to try to fight Ender with no arms. is the end of the story. We kind of do the Shawn Michaels Ric Flair ending before it was actually done, which is pretty cool. Token like almost wins the match, even though both his arms have been broken, and Ender like looks at him and says, they don't make them like us anymore, and then beats him. And then like 3 months later, Asylum closes. It's done. But it was a really fucked up place for a long time, which was cool.
And a place that you called home for a long time.
Yeah, 4 years, man.
It's a hell of a run, regardless. Yeah, whether you come in as a wrestler and you end up being on staff and helping run the place and writing the shows.
Yeah, well, in Asylum, like, the guys that were involved was the crazy part, right? Like, Tom Ford was there. I keep saying Tom's name, but like Tomer Chen, a lot of people don't know Tomer. Tom Cooper, who handled Rave Caprino, he brought in other characters there. The guy was incredible. Dave was there. He was incredible. There was this guy who handled a character named the Freak, which is like the most generic name on the planet.
Almost. There was the Brock once.
Yeah. But the Freak, like, this dude could just flat out write. But he'd only come around for like 4 months and he'd vanish. It was like he had like a seasonal job or something. But he was like, he would come back, man, and his stories would be nuts. They'd be over. They were hot. Like, it was like an immediate pop. And the quality of writing was really high at points. So it was really cool being there. Pete was there for a little bit. I think he did a couple shows with us with Dez Aragon. And then we closed up shop on the public view of Asylum with the whole promotion basically getting arrested, and we go on a hiatus for like 2 years. During this time,
fitting.
Yeah. The ending couldn't have been better, right? Like that ending was perfect for the Fed, and the fact we actually managed to put like the shows got so sporadic at the end. The fact that we actually put an ending on it was amazing. Well, and like the guys in the Fed were all degenerates. Like we were all, we're 17 years old and we're drinking and partying and like talking to each other, like on AOL Direct Connect, like being hammered out of our minds. Like the fact we were able to do any of this was
a miracle in itself.
Among itself.
Yeah,
exactly. So I actually reread a bunch of Asylum stuff before this because the place was, storytelling wise, it was the grittiest, dirtiest, nastiest, but it was also the most fun I've had in the hobby.
There you go. It's a bold statement.
And that's the important part, right?
Yeah.
And it was because I was the recruiter, so I brought in all my friends, like, and I helped my friends get into everywhere else because Asylum was like, you could put that tag on your resume, and it became like this, like you'd email the FWO, they're like, oh shit, yeah, I knew that guy, bring him in.
Or anybody that was in part of one of those big feds, everybody's happy to have you because they think you're going to attract other people.
Yes, exactly. And the FWO like was the biggest Fed, but if you were in Asylum, like you basically got a free pass in. Because Travis read the Asylum, like a lot of guys there read the Asylum. Warren never read the Asylum, which I said he should have, but you'll get that joke. But it was a cool place, and we all joined FWO. I get lost in the shuffle really bad there. Like the roster got so bloated when I joined, and that was the thing about a lot of people, I think you've talked to Warren and Pete and Linz.
Yep.
who they all got over there, right? I didn't as much. I was like cruiserweight champion, I was hardcore champion, but I never really got out of that scene. And it was very, very hard to get over there. And the workload was so big. Like we had 2 shows a week, pay-per-view weeks. Like we didn't skip our show. Like it was like a real wrestling promotion. Like
So you had TV and pay-per-view, yeah.
Yeah, and like Countdown to Oblivion was like the most brutal thing in the world. That show, like Countdown, we would do it the 29th, the 30th, and the 31st. And it would go countdown 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
And every show was pay-per-view quality. So we'd write Twilight, which happened in the middle of December. We would write 2 shows or 3 shows between Twilight and Countdown, and then we go countdown 3, 2, 1. And like every year, like that workload, it's Christmas, you got your family around and you're like, oh, nope, we got to go away and write this e-wrestling match. I'll be in the dungeon for the next 4.5 hours writing a 20-page, huge match. And everything was written. Like now I read everything and it has like commentators and stuff. And we didn't write like that. We wrote, everything was like novel format.
Okay.
So it made it a lot harder to have these long matches too. Like, just imagine like the longest match you've ever read, take out all the commentary
and try to fill it in with more action. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So you'd have these huge monster matches, that you'd have to write. And it was a cool place. But it was really hard to get over. I even tried to bring in Token there. At one point, which was a stupid idea. Like, it was just one of those bad decisions. I was like, oh, this character's popular, like people want to work with him, which worked initially. Like Tom and I had a little tag team going for a little bit. There was a group called Heat, which was Craig Miles, Rana Venosa, and like a couple other guys. And we would joke and we were cold. And they all had like, Heat had like these little names they'd use afterwards, like Flying Frogmen or, whatever version of that team it was. So we did Cold, We Sell Snow as the gimmick because Tom's character, that was like Tom High Flyers thing, and Token was a drug dealer. And like I said, FWO was great. Like the stories everybody told were amazing. And it was really cool for me because Joe finally got to be a handler. And like he had done so much for all of us in Asylum that like anything Joe asked of us, we just do.
Sure.
So like if Joe needed a win on a show, like you're like, yeah, sure, dude, I'll write it for you. We'll write 12 segments for it. We'll work together. It was awesome. But FWO had a lot of politics too. And if you weren't the kingpin of those politics or like friends with one of the kingpins of those politics, it was really hard. And I think like Dwanthony talks a little bit about that. And like, it's a good point to make because like you hear like Pete talk about it and Pete's friends with Warren and Pete was like one of the kingpins, right?
Yep.
And I don't blame Pete for that. Pete worked hard. Pete worked his ass off and he kind of became that. But the other guys who weren't friends with Pete or friends with Joe, like they had a lot of trouble. And like Dwanthony, when he came in, he had a lot of trouble. Just finding people to work with because we started booking stuff. Like I think I listened to Pete and Warren's episode and they booked a year out. How do you
incorporate anything?
Yeah. Like you're a new guy in there and everybody's booked a year out. Like how the hell does that work? Like it got so bad that like it really made me think like, wow, we should be resetting this. Like we shouldn't book this far out. We should make everybody talk about it and come up with stories, take 2 weeks off and come up with stories or something. But we didn't do that. We just kept going at the rate we were going, which was going to lead to everybody burning out, including Travis, who all he had to do was hit publish. But he had to make like a ton of art for us. So we just kind of kept running. And then eventually, I get pretty frustrated. My character's going nowhere. Pete and I had I finally had Rush like over because Joe like did me a lot of favors and got me involved in a cool story with Brand Frontier and Kellen Kincaid. And Kellen Kincaid's like still super over at that point. And they were the world heavyweight title feud. So like Joe kind of got me as like a third wheel in there to kind of help me get over a little bit. And we end up, so that story kind of ends and Pete's the United States champion. And like we work together for like 2 weeks, right? It's going to be like this little thing, but it's some little bit of filler for us. And we blow it off with a match. It's like a cage match for the US title. It's going to be the main event. And Pete was supposed to write it. And I think Pete thought I was supposed to write it, but that match ended up being like 12 moves and my character lost. And I was just so pissed.
Yeah.
Like I understand where he was coming from because he thought I was supposed to write it. I thought he was writing it. And honestly, I should have been the one writing it because he's the one doing me the favor. But, he's a better match writer than me, so I was going to let him do it. Well, you gotta play to your strengths, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, your strength in that moment is Pete.
And you got to
write a great match.
And you got to know your strengths too.
Yeah. So Pete, so that was like my breaking point. And it kind of broke me for the hobby. I didn't leave FWO. I just stopped doing anything. I'd come back and like write it like a couple segments and 2 role plays and a match, and then I'd just leave again.
How long did that
was
go
it for
on?
me? Probably about 2-3 years.
So you were just you were in a funk. You were in an e-funk.
Yeah, and like the cool part about FWO is once you were in, you were always in. So like I could go backstage at any point, like read stuff, talk to people, try to get myself out of the funk, whatever I wanted to do. And eventually like FWO closes down. Finally. Countdown kills us because that workload was so extreme. It was really like, it was obvious that it was going to happen and we should have seen it coming, and it was just stupid that we let it happen that way. But it broke us. Like those shows broke us. And we had the stories we were telling on Countdowns were incredible. Like they were amazing. But the problem was it was like you could run a whole feud over Countdown, right? Like the show was that long and that big of a deal. You could literally start a feud on Countdown 3 and end it on Countdown 1. Yeah, I mean, but it was cool. It was really cool that you could do that. But it just absolutely wore us out, man. It was just so...
The workload is just ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah, 2 shows a week, 4 pay-per-views in December. Like,
ungodly.
What Fed does that? Like, but that's why the FWO is the FWO, right?
Why are they punishing us? No.
Well, yeah, Travis would beat us and we'd just keep writing. All right, cool. We were big in Estonia, man. That's all we can say. We had great hits from Estonia. So I like wander off into the wilderness. FWO is closed. Everybody messages me like, hey, you should come join this Fed with me. And I'm like, no, I don't care. And this guy, Dan McDevitt, messages me. And Dan is really cool and really nice and tells me he has all these story ideas and he has all these great people that are going to write in the Fed with us. And one of my favorite people from talking just like the 21 wrestling angle, Trammell Martin, the dude's amazing. He's there and I really wanted to work with him. Like we used to talk for 40 minutes at a time on the phone, 2 hours at a time on the phone about like storyline ideas, and we just never did them. So Dan's like, hey, you can come here, you can do all this stuff, and it's Legacy of Champions. It's Lock and LOC, whatever you want to call it. And we'd run and we'd get the Fed up and running, and I'd vanish, or Dan opened Legacy of Champions, I think like 12 times. Like literally this Fed was supposed to open 12 different times. But it had like, Dan was a great artist, man. He had like this killer style. Like the posers were almost like comic booky, right? And like, so everybody always wanted to be involved with Dan's stuff.
Oh,
like,
this is where the high flyer poster comes from.
Yes. Yeah. High flyers poster comes from there. Like these guys, like Dan was just awesome. So we end up through these different times, like one time Dan's supposed to open and doesn't open, and I write like a 30-part roleplay series for the opening. It's like, almost like a small novel. And then Dan doesn't open and everybody like goes back to the wilderness. And then, Dan would open and like, I wouldn't have him, like I wouldn't be around. So we played like this hit and miss game for a long time. That's where I got like a flake,
label
at that point, which was fair, but also it was annoying how many times Dan would try to open this place and close this place on us. And then, yeah, man, I just stopped e-wrestling for years and years and years. And then my brother makes me watch Wrestle Kingdom. And I'm like, hey, I wonder if that e-wrestling thing still happens. And I'm like, who would be e-wrestling out of everybody I know? Who do you think I messaged, Mikey?
Pete.
Tom Ford.
Oh, damn. Close. Yep.
Close call. But I messaged Tom. And Tom's like real sketchy on me doing anything. I think he's like, you guys are doing Defiance at the time or whatever. And he's real sketchy on me doing anything because he knows, have the label.
You got the flake label, yeah.
Yeah. So I went from this guy who used to write the entire show for like these huge feds to this guy who has the flake label.
Yep.
Like two totally different worlds.
It's almost like, just different eras where at one point you were super committed and another time just a bunch of missteps. So it is what it is.
Yeah. So this guy, Antoine, starts this Fed called the International Grappler Society, IGS, and he gets a bunch of us to come back. Roland's one of them. This guy Logan, who handled Golden Glen Miller, he gets a lot of us to like start writing again, and we put out like 3 killer shows, man. Like they were really, really good shows. We finally started working together and like plan these big stories. We had this crazy tournament for the 5-star title, which I got to win. I got to work with David Noble. I don't know who that handler is, but that dude was awesome. And then Antoine like threw a fit in a Skype chat one day and the Fed closed. And like we had like 3 great shows. Like, dude, you did it. You have it. You have everything you ever wanted. You got an artist doing free posers. Like we have everything. And the Fed closed. Roland ended up joining Defiance. I went back to the woods. Like I'm like, screw this. I'm not doing this anymore. And because I couldn't do it with my friends. Like if I would have applied to Defiance at that point, there is a 0.0% chance I get in.
Like, Defiance does have a voting entry system. You have to get voted in more yeses than nos.
Yeah. It's like it's a really cool thing because if you really have a problem with somebody, you could say no. But for somebody like me, where I wanted to come back and I knew the dedication level I could provide, it sucked, right?
Yeah.
Because I knew like Tom would never have said yes. Like he just would have immediately said no. Linz would have said no. Like all these people would have just said no. And rightfully so. 100% rightfully so. So I sign up for a place. I go to EW Mania, which was I think Ben's site, and he had a top 100 list. We're back to those.
Classic.
And the number 1 Fed on the top 100 list is called the EWC.
Yes.
And I click the link, and it's a board Fed. I haven't been in a board Fed since 1999. I haven't had a poser image since 1999. And they use pick bases. And I'm like, man, this is going to be rough. How do I do this? And I start reading the role plays. And I'm like, these are going to be terrible. Like literally the first thing I think pops in my head, like, this is going to be awful. And I read a couple guys. And I'm like, wow, like these guys actually have some talent. Like this is going to be a little bit of a challenge for me to be a role player here. And I'm still trapped in like the Angle Fed mindset where like character development's the number 1 priority. So I sign up to EWC. I win, like I do pretty well in my first couple matches. And then I start getting my ass kicked because I don't know how to trash talk. But I created this cool character called Clay Bird.
Okay.
Clay Bird was pretty interesting. Like he's a Texan. And I always liked like the Stan Hansen stuff when I watched All Japan. So I kind of wanted to do that, and I thought it would be a good like way to trash talk. Is Southern slang is like real like backhand compliments and stuff like that. So it'd be pretty cool. So I joined EWC. I had a really good time. I ended up having to leave for a little bit because of work. I come back and I made a bunch of really good friends there. Tony, shout out. That dude's awesome.
Tony!
I love Tony. Melody Malone's handler. Anna's a really, really cool. Cyrus Black's handler is really awesome. Chris. I didn't think I was going to get close to these people because that Fed was going to be a tool for me to show I could do stuff.
You were, just getting rid of the label.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then you started your podcast, and I had like completely resigned myself to I'm going to just do this, and I'm never going to tell anybody I'm doing this. And my old friends don't need to know I'm still doing this.
It was your dirty little secret.
Yeah, exactly. And like nobody needed to know I was like the writing style I was using was like really different for me. So nobody ever would have figured it out either. Like it was just a totally different place. And I really fell in love with the place. Like it's a really cool Fed, 4 brands. There's a lot going on. The role players there are actually really good. They kick my ass all the time.
Yeah, EWC is a great Fed. They've been a long-time sponsor of the Efed podcast, and you can catch them at EWC4life.com.
Yeah. Thanks for the plug. But so I was able to show like I could role play and like I was going to be around and I was committed, and then I ended up signing up. I applied to Defiance in like October, and finally got to debut my character, which will be cool, and start writing in Angle Feds again. I'm still going to do EWC, but I think I'm going to take a little bit of focus off that to kind of get started with Defiance for a little while. Then maybe go back and forth or do EWC kind of part-time for a little bit until I can really get my hands around Defiance.
Well, there you go. That's and that kind of brings us up to today. You're getting ready to make your Defiance debut. It's been a little bit of a wait because we had to finish an arc, but it's been a lot of fun, and I'm ready to see what you got in the Angle side of things. It's the first time we're getting to Fed together.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. I thought about joining HOW a while back, and I think you were there at the time. I don't know if you're still in HOW. I haven't really read that Fed a whole lot.
No, I took a sabbatical from HOW.
Yeah, I was just reading Max Cale. Like that was like my thing.
So good.
Like I would just go there. Yeah, dude, that dude's incredible.
There are heels in this game, and there are villains. And then there's Max Cale, who's a super villain in my eyes.
Oh, I would love to do like a Token Weed Max Cale story. Like that would have just been incredible.
Yeah.
At the time.
Awesome.
Like they were awesome.
Yep. So yeah, but that brings us to today. EWC, one of the bigger Feds still going with an incredible amount of handlers on their roster. 4 different brands, 4 different styles of writing, and it's all overseen by Mac over there.
Yeah, Mac's a cool dude. And Mac, like he does a really good job delegating, which is what I really like. Is every brand has their own GM, and like you just work with your brand GM versus anybody else, and those guys are all awesome. Like Alex, Darren,
yep.
Chris, like those guys all kill it. Prime, like all do a great job.
They really do. And we're going to do a great job at DefianceWrestling.com too. So check.
Yeah, DefianceWrestling.com.
Check out DefianceWrestling.com.
How many times do we have to say that?
Brian's going to throw one more in after we stop this right now.
DefianceWrestling.com.
So let's go ahead and get to these questions from our crowd. How's that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Up first, we got at Fireflower Fuse on Twitter. Hi, Connor Fuse here. Wondering what video games you'd like to play. Want to co-op with me and my bro?
So, video games. That's actually one of the big reasons why I took a break was I started playing World of Warcraft a whole lot, which is a terrible game and will eat your soul. So I had to really like playing WoW. That's my video game of choice for a long time, and I realized it's just bad for me as a person. I become a miserable jerk the whole time I play it. So.
And you recently mentioned you got the PS5. What are you playing on that?
PS5. I've been playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
How is that?
About mad. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is really cool. I really like the story for the game. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, and I haven't played a lot of Assassin's Creed games, so I don't know like what's new. Like the last one I played was like Assassin's Creed 1.
Yeah, same. And I heard a lot of them were bad in between, so I want to grab the new one and see how it is.
Yeah, dude, like boats are sweet. Like it's really cool.
Yeah. Black Flag was great. Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where you're the pirate. Oh, so good.
I didn't even play that one. That's what I'm saying.
So good.
No idea.
But anyway,
like
you're playing Valhalla. You're playing some Madden.
Yeah. I bought Madden because like it's Madden, and
I'm protesting.
I played the game my whole life, and I gotta keep my skills up for if I ever have children, I gotta be able to whip their ass or my nephew's ass. I gotta
there you go.
Be able to handle myself.
Well, I feel it. And who's your team? Start there.
I'm a Steelers fan.
Oh, never mind. We're gonna hang up right now.
It's a good place to be till
until Monday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we won't get into it. I'm not gonna drill you on that one too bad. So, over on the Discord side of things, let's see what we got. People, I had this up and then I closed it. So. All right, coming up first, we got Meg. Wasn't ranked on the TEFP 100. That's a weird name. RP or angled? What do you prefer?
I prefer angle feds. I prefer having control over my character's story. Just in like the wins and losses, like knowing what's coming, knowing where I'm going to go, and like what I'm going to do with everything. Where roleplay it's a different challenge, like rolling with the punches. But it can be really frustrating whenever you've built yourself into like you can box yourself into corners sometimes in RP feds, and it's really dumb to do. I do it to myself because I'm gonna do like the best I can in that moment to make it the result I want. But it really sucks when you do it. So
we also.
I'm
sorry.
No, I was gonna say so. Angle feds by like a lot.
By a lot. Up next is Cat Passidy. Is it true that you were born in a pit of fire?
No, but there's a funny story about that. Like, so back in the day, whenever I started to get the Flake moniker, EW Network or EW Planet, one of the sites, Pete actually did a running joke where I was a Chuck Norris joke, and they had a whole thread about Brock, and they would do Brock Chuck Norris jokes all day. Like, I would log on to the forums, and I'm like, oh, they're still making fun of me. Come back 3 months later, oh, they're still making fun of me. So I may have been born in a pit of fire in one of those stories.
Well, at least you had a reputation.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't forget about you.
Yeah, and that's important.
Up next is hashtag is your mom hot OG.
Thank you, Rick.
Question 1, is your mom hot?
My mom's a beautiful lady who's lovingly married to my father, who makes a great meatloaf.
So sorry, Rick, she's not single. Question 2 can be skipped. Question 3, what's the most important quality in storytelling when you're crafting your RPs and promos?
RPs and promos, I think the most important part in storytelling is knowing where you want to go and planning it out. I try to do an outline before I do every role play just to make sure I hit the key points I'm looking for, especially in RP feds. Angle feds, basically you're telling that story and you just map it out and write it, right? Like, but it's all in your prep work and being able to set yourself up. If you're going to tell a specific story through role plays, you have to do it. You have to map it out. If you don't, you're going to be the biggest stupid mistake. I've made that stupid mistake, so I just don't.
And you lose every time you make that mistake.
Well, in RP feds, yeah, for sure. And angle feds, you just look like an idiot. So.
If you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted, in one moment. Would you capture it or let it slip? I almost got through it.
I did capture it. I did that in Asylum. I captured it. Right?
Yeah, you got to.
Yeah.
All right, question 5. Have you heard about EWTs? You can get all kinds of amazing e-wrestling gear right there, all in one place, right at www.efedtees.com.
Do you guys pay Rick to ask that
We
question?
don't, but I appreciate it very much. Don't tell him that he should be paid for that either.
I think we just did. Or are we going to cut this
We'll
part
cut
out?
this part out. Brian, you know what to do. Up next is at Tony, number 62.
Do we have to to go through all of Tony's ridiculous questions?
Yeah, well, absolutely.
All right.
God damn, I have so many questions. When is the cutoff date?
It was a while ago.
It was today. As you listen to this, it was 2 weeks ago. At Lassiford, how big is Batista's dick?
I'm unsure of the size. I've heard rumors, but I don't have any way to.
No concrete evidence.
Yeah. No.
At Fuzz Loves Me for Real, it's Lynn's. Are there any characters being written today that you think would have been successful in the Asylum, either during the time it was traditional wrestling or during the snuff era?
Yeah, and that's something we didn't really talk a whole lot about with Snuff era. But Max Cale 110% would have been absolutely fucking amazing in Asylum.
Yes.
I've actually messaged the guy on Discord to tell him how good he is, because I enjoy reading his work and I want him to know other people read it and enjoy it. I would have if I would have read that dude's roleplay in 2003, I would have just sent him a message and said, "Hey, you're coming to Asylum. This is Joe's email. This is his AIM handle. I'll give you all the information. This is his private AIM handle. You're coming in, and this is how it's going to be." And the other one is, to me, I think Deacon would have been really, really, really cool in Asylum.
Warren's character.
And yeah. And it's because of his religion, and I don't think Warren likes painting his character into that corner, but I think the dichotomy of Deacon in Asylum would have been amazing. Villamender and Deacon, Token Weed and Deacon, drug dealer, murderer, rapist,
and a Deacon.
It's literally Deacon could have been our superhero.
Yeah, trying to clean up Asylum,
or just trying to stay alive around these people, because that was every face's goal was just to make it through the next day. Literally, it was just, how do I make it out of this show alive and get into the next one?
God.
Well, the Snuff era was really bad, man. I think Pete talked a whole lot about that because he was really involved in it. I think Pete killed Token Weed in there, and I didn't really I must have been drunk and told him to do it, but we argue about if he's dead or not all the time.
Who from back in the day that isn't writing anymore would you like to see get back into the hobby besides the Flying Frenchie?
One, the Flying Frenchie.
Yes.
Two, Tom Cooper, who handled Rave Caprino. Tom and I, like I said, we grew up in the hobby together for a long time. Tom was absolutely an incredible writer. James Lynch, this dude, he handled the character on Warren's podcast that's unpronounceable, or whatever. I've never known how to pronounce it, but he was a really cool writer. He's a really cool dude. Trammell Martin. When you've been in the hobby this long, there's more people that you'd like to work with that are gone
than are currently in the game.
Yeah, and I'm not saying anything bad about the people currently in the game. It's just
you grew up with these people.
Yeah. They're some of these people I've known my whole I've known Tom Ford for 20 years. I'm 34.
I'm sorry.
How is that
man.
Possible? I've known Roland I owe Roland $100 because he paid me to make posers and I never made them. And I still owe Roland $100 to this day. I have to send it back to him.
What is that? What is that in Canadian?
It's like $5. Though in Canadian money, it's like
I think he's gained money over inflation over the years.
Yeah, I made like 12 images, and Roland told me it was fine, but like I was supposed to be the artist forever, and I just never did. And it was just because of like there was just so much going on. But I actually hooked him up with a really good artist. So, finder's fee, right? That's what that
Very good. Up next is still Lynn's favorite Silo moment.
So Silo has kind of a bad rep. The dude could flat out write, but the way you had to book this character, man, he was like a monster and like this juggernaut. And if you booked it any other way, the character turned into like this whiny bitch. But if you booked it as like this juggernaut, it was amazing. Like it was a really cool character, and Justin could really write. So for me, like I would say my favorite Silo moment is in Pinnacle of Insane Wrestling's reboot, where Silo was the monster he was meant to be and just ran away there and was a really cool champion for a long time. I answered that seriously, by the way.
If Dan McDivitt were to reopen LOC, would you rejoin?
This is a trap.
This is a trick question.
And it would be this is a trap. I would I would have to see how committed Dan was. I would basically make Dan do the same test I did to myself. Right? Like, Dan, you have to go join a Fed that has no bearing on who you are, and we'll take you. And if you can be there for 6 months, yes. If you can't, then no.
Fair enough. Who are you most looking forward to working with in Defiance?
Honestly, like right now, my first few partner is really cool. I'm really happy. I'm working with who I'm working with. I don't want to like spoil a ton of stuff. I'd love to work with Linz and Tom and Warren, like especially Warren. We worked like a little thing in FWO at one point whenever we were banished overseas, and it was really fun to write with Warren. Honestly, like I haven't heard a bad thing about anybody in Defiance. So to me, like I want to work with everybody. Like Roland and I have known each other for that long and never worked an angle.
Wow, really?
Never. Yeah, and like I've known Lynn's forever, She finally friended me on Facebook again.
Well, there's this guy, Trash Can Tim. He is the worst. So don't work with that guy.
You're just burying people.
And Joe, oh man, these guys, they're new to the Fed, so I got to be nice to them in chat, but I can just obliterate them here on the podcast.
So Trash Can Tim's weird because there was this character
Garbage Bag Johnny. Oh my god! So I met Garbage Bag Johnny in Chicago, right? Met him in person, and hung out, had a good time. And so when Trash Bag Tim or Trash Can Tim, now I'm fucked up. When Trash Can Tim joins Defiance, I'm like, "Hey brother, what's up? It's been a long time." And he's like, "Who are you?" I'm like, "Oh, we hung out, we met. You don't remember?" He's like, "No." I'm like, "You're from Chicago, right?" He's like, "Yeah."
Wait, he's from Chicago?
Yeah, dude, it's so uncanny that they have the same almost character, not same character, same name, but and they're from the same place and they're the same guy, but not the same guy. I still think it's the same guy, and he's just fucking really pulling my leg.
He's trolling the shit out of you right now.
Yeah, he really
is.
That's
amazing. That's a great.
It is. If it goes for a year or more, and it turns out to be him, I got to buy the man dinner or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not like a cheap dinner either. Like a nice.
No, dinner. Yeah, like something nice. Yeah, Ruth Chris or something.
Oh yeah, there we go.
All right, up next is the Keystone State Killer, Mr. Chris Ross. Check out that interview. Number one, is it true a gay literature author actually posted the Asylum forums looking to hire the writer of that spot?
So that spot is the man-on-man anal rape. The answer is no, but yes. So he didn't message about the man-on-man rape. He actually messaged about the castration because the castration was very graphic. And Rave took his time. is the easiest way to put that without having to put like an NC-17 label on the podcast. Rafe took his time, and somebody who read erotic fan fiction found the asylum by searching some terms and was very interested in paying Coop to write an erotic fan fiction story. And Tom said he didn't do it, but the dude took some time off. I'm pretty sure he did. I don't blame him. Like, he got offered like $500, and we were like 16, 17 at the time. Like, $500 is a lot of money.
What made the Token Weed character stand out from your run-of-the-mill stoner like Mikey Unlikely?
Yeah, that was a shot. Hashtag shots fired.
Throwing shade.
I think the Asylum, just the nature of like the stoner character wasn't going to work. And he had to go to a very, very different place. You know, I handled some personal issues with the character. And I talked about like the character's like match history, but like in role plays, I had some problems with some addiction when I was younger. And I was able, you know, at 17 years old, I was having some issues, and I was able to kind of put that out there into the world. And it helped me handle it. And it was able to like, and it was weird because it's basically the progression I took with some issues I had, you know, like weed to like harder drugs. And obviously I made him go to a whole other space with heroin and everything, and like actually researching like later, you know, he's a junkie, like he's got track marks. You know, he's literally shooting heroin and, you know, waking up like half covered in his own vomit to wander into the ring and try to kill someone. So that's why I think he was different. Like the character was very, very dark. And that was just where I was in my life.
It's good that you can take e-wrestling and channel things and use it as not only an escape, but a way to delve into those things.
Yeah, I mean, like the story I talked about with Ezra Revenel, who handled by Dave. Dave went through a lot, man, and Dave's character ended up committing suicide at some point during the angle. But Dave, like, I handled my addiction. Like, we talked privately, and like I handled my addiction, and Dave handled his depression through that story. And it was cool that we were able to help each other like that. We had no idea that's what we were doing until after we wrote it. But we sat down and talked about it, and like it both helped us out a lot.
It's very cool. All right, up next, we still got Chris has got one more for you. Where did he go? Want to help me shave Megan's cat's butts? That's a big change in mood there.
Yeah.
So how do we bounce back from that? We go to Warren next. What's the worst story you were a part of in the Asylum and the FWO? So give us one for each.
All right, worst story in Asylum. It was the summer of Immortals. Right after Immortals, because there was nowhere to go from that crazy show if you weren't the main event. Which I was in the main event at the time, like in that scene, and I was trying to build up other characters, and I don't think we ever really did it right. But there was a guy, his name was Ike. Ike was like a friend of mine from like this old Fed back in the day, and he handled this tag team Dream. And Dream, like, they were these crazy dudes who took like they made like a designer drug that made you dream in like an alternate dimension. And obviously my character being a drug dealer was very interested in this product. And we wrote, like, initially it started off really good and we got a bunch of good feedback, but I don't think we were talented enough to write the ending of like this alternate dimension world and this real world at the same time. Like, we were trying to clash like these two crazy, like these two worlds together in this story. And we weren't good enough to do it.
Well, at least you're honest about it.
No, I mean, like, you got to look at your failures and be like, how did this go wrong? Like, this was a cool story. Like, if I thought it was cool, Ike thought it was cool. We've talked to a couple people. Joe thought it was cool. Like, how did it not get over? Right. And by over, I mean like getting posts on fan boards about it and getting, People talking about it in feedback threads. How did it not get over, right? Like, 'cause you used to have a way to measure how over you were. Like, you can't be fake over. Like, you were over or you weren't over. And this just didn't get over. And it probably just was talent level.
Very good. That's it from Warren.
The FWO one, I tried to handle a character in 2007 when the FWO came back called Katsuro.
Okay.
I wanted him to be like this, like Japanese, like Playboy character. I wrote it for like 2 weeks and it was awful. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I made like a gigantic ass out of myself. Because it was just so bad. And then I went back to not being around. I think I had Toka Weed come in for a week and kill the character. And then I went back to not being around. That was the easiest way to handle it.
Yeah, no, that's one way to get rid of a character.
Yeah, when you handle a murderer, you can just do that.
Up next is Tone. Why is your favorite SXM radio station 415? And for the listeners at home, that's Vivid XM. Porn stars discussing things.
So we used to do... So it's not actually my favorite channel, but I told Tony about it one day because he does a lot of driving for his job. And he was bored and he was tired and he wanted something to listen to. And I said, Tony, we used to do this as a joke. Turn on channel 415 on your Sirius. So he turns it on. And he's like, what did you make me listen to? He needed to find like the religious channel to get Jesus back in his car with him. It was a lot. But we used to do conventions and for my old job. And we travel all over the country. And this is one of the reasons why I had to take like a long break in Efeding, was like when you're on the road like 4 or 5 days a week. You can't really sit down and write, especially when you're in a room full of like 4 dudes and you're just going to the bar all the time. But as a joke, like if everybody would fall asleep, because I was like normally the driver at night, I would turn on Vivid Radio and turn it all the way up.
Okay.
Until everybody woke up. So they'd wake up to porn stars talking about things, and I would think it was hilarious. So.
And now it's inside joke in Efeding.
Yeah, exactly.
Tony's up next again. Why is Tony your favorite person ever?
Tony's my favorite person because he's really real and he cares about everybody, and he's like e-wrestling's dad. A crazy story about Tony is he hunted down a handler one time from Scotland and called him at work because he disappeared. So don't disappear on Tony. But those guys were really good friends, and the guy like just totally disappeared, and everybody was like really, really, because it was like right as COVID started, so everybody like freaked out, like really worried. So Tony found him, and like that just shows like Tony like genuinely cares about his e-wrestling friends, and they're his actual friends.
There you go. And that's what you want. I mean, that's what I've made a lot of friends in this game, but I've made a lot of really good friends from the game too. So that's awesome. At John Thompson, TW Combat, what's your biggest accomplishment in e-wrestling?
Winning the Asylum World Championship was like the biggest thing I can think of that I did that I felt the best about. I told a story 2 years prior to that where I had a title match, and it was really like it got really over. Everybody thought I should have won, but I didn't want to win it there because I wanted to draw it out. And I think the fact that I led that like upper mid card status run for 3 years before we actually did it really made it more special when it happened.
Right. I mean, anytime you work at something for a long time.
Yeah, it was awesome. And it, like being able to be in that upper mid card role, I could work with more people. Where whenever you're champion, like you kind of got to work with the guys who are on the up and up, on like way on the up. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the most disappointing of your e-wrestling career? You ever lose a match and say, "You mother"?
Not really, because I was in Angle Feds for so long. Like, I would say for me, like the most disappointing thing was that I didn't get over an FWO as much as I wanted to. And I felt like I worked at it, You know, it was something like I felt like I did a good job. And, you know, like I always participated in everything we possibly could do. Like we used to write these crazy role plays, and we were trapped in a snowstorm. And we wrote a story role play, and everybody went around and told a story of their lives. And like I always made sure I was involved in that stuff. Like anything we could do multi-character wise, I felt like I really worked hard there, but I just couldn't get over it. That sucks.
Yeah, it does suck when you put in the work and you just can't catch, I don't know, not the attention, but necessarily the I don't know, it's hard to describe. You can't catch the Fed head's attention
Like,
enough to get the push.
Well, that and like, once again, I want to say this. There were real fans. People cared about our work. And like, if somebody was in the upper mid card or in the main event that shouldn't have been there, they like revolted. Like, I remember John Crisp and Black Quicksilver, which Pete worked really hard to get those guys that story, and they'd been in the Fed forever. And the boards went nuts because those two characters they weren't over in their eyes and nobody cared about them. So why are they the main event of SummerSlam?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's hard to get an entire roster behind it if they don't feel like someone's ready for the main.
Yeah, and like I said, it wasn't even the roster. It was getting the 150 people on the forums that were reading our shows.
Getting them behind it.
Yeah, because it didn't matter to us, but it mattered to some of the people in the Fed, and that made the roster not get behind it, and that made it a little bit worse than
sure.
What it was.
Would you rather burp farts or sweat pee?
Neither.
That's a good answer.
I don't think there's no.
Alias has a question for you. F, marry, kill Jean-Claude Van Damme, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Dolph Lundgren.
Marry Jean-Claude Van Damme because he's a beautiful man. F Arnold Schwarzenegger to say I F the Terminator. Ooh. And kill Dolph Lundgren to say I killed Dolph Lundgren. That's pretty easy.
If he dies, he dies. What? This one's from Tony. What's your favorite color? Heather Gray or Cyrus Black?
This is another inside joke.
It's an EWC joke.
Yeah, well, in Heather Gray, like it's a real inside joke for part of it. Heather Gray. Heather Gray is my favorite color, Tony.
At Alex, happy to be here, smiley. Is it possible for a new Fed to reach the level of an EWC or an FWO? Or have we reached the point of either too high an expectation or too short an attention span to allow it?
I think right now the community's too divided to ever have an FWO again. Like, you know, like with Discord versus like the fan forums or like the hobby discussion forums. Not everybody reads everybody else's stuff. Like it was so easy whenever you were going, like you go to the forums and you're like, oh, wonder what the new topic is. Is it Simon trolling someone? Or is it a show feedback thread? And like you look at the show feedback thread and if everybody said it was good, maybe you clicked it and read it and it was work you'd never read. As like somebody who recruited heavily for Asylum, like that was something I did all the time. And you're never going to get to that point without having a place where everybody can discuss that stuff and really talk about it and really put in that effort for results to be a bigger deal. You know, I've seen people try to do it and I don't think we're at that point or we'll get to that point in the near future, barring something crazy happen. Like the way the EW Planet community happened is so off the wall crazy that they ended up in a aftermag, like the wrestler or whatever that thing's called. They did like a community highlight, and EW Planet was the community highlight for a week, and the place like exploded overnight. Like it went from like 300 dudes to like 10,000 dudes, and then back to like 4,000 dudes. But it was still this is astronomical number of people.
That's pretty crazy though.
Yeah. The fact that e-wrestling was in an after mag is nuts.
Dwayne up next, ranked 249. As someone who was in FWO, it wasn't as great as it seemed. I can name a few other feds I would rank higher. That's all he says.
Yeah, and I think he's talking about like ACW and a couple other places. And I'll be honest, I think FWO, like whenever you look at it in the body of work over the length of time with the talent they had, it's really hard to say that wasn't the best place. For that group, for PTC, FWC, and EW Planet, the fact it took the top end of all three places into one Fed was just really, really special.
Dwayne has a couple other questions now that you asked him. Who do we blame for letting you into FWO, LOC, Jolt, and TA?
Myself, because I've emailed the owner of that Fed every single time I got into any of them. That like applications aren't open, I'm sending an email to the owner like, hey,
blame
what's
Brock.
up? Blame Bork.
Do you have blackmail on someone?
No.
Not yet.
No, not that I would ever use. Yeah, no. I'm waiting to get blackmailed. I'm gonna hang out outside his house.
He wants the fist, I see. Kevin R., this is the Flying Frenchie. Do you have a favorite character trait that started as a one-off joke and then hung around?
Not really. That started as a joke. Like stuff that like started as funny for other people's characters, yes, but I wrote like a lot of really serious characters, so I couldn't really take that into adding it in. There was a character Hypnosis though in the Asylum, and one of the funniest like versions of that I can think of is Hypnosis. The handler was in a chat room with all of us. Like we used to do these 50, 60 man chat rooms and stuff, and for some reason he called someone an ear minter. And I got Jeremy Frampton, who ran the FWO at the time, and they used to post like live pay-per-view results in a chat room, like an IRC chat room on their website. And I got him to slide like a commentator calling a wrestler an ear minter in. And then we slid it into the Asylum pay-per-view like 4 hours later and made the character say it. And then the character just ran with it all the time.
That's amazing. This one.
There was
sorry.
No, go ahead.
This one we got via DM earlier in the week. This one's from Lizzie, aka Ruth Ann Aggression from the EWC. In the 20 years you've been in this game, what have you felt that you've learned the most about your own roleplay style? And do you feel it's still the same, or it made you change as time goes on?
Oh, I'm 100% a different writer. I'm a different writer from 2005-6 Brock to that era to now, especially like in roleplay feds. Like I'm a totally different writer. EWC makes you write like almost a certain style because they have like this really nice scorecard system where you get like a ton of feedback and you find out like basically you can see where you scored and how to get better, but it makes you write a certain way. So that made me like change like my RP fed style a lot.
It's interesting. I think that's kind of, every RP fed, when you go in, you have to work a certain style for the fed head or the judge.
Yeah, and the EWC, they have like, there's a bunch of people that can judge your role plays at any time. So you're writing toward the scorecard you judge, right? And that's what you write towards.
Interesting. So if you could tell your younger self when you started the game something that you feel like you needed to know now when it comes to the game, what would you tell yourself?
Don't name your character Token Weed. You'll never hear the end of it. That was the big one. The other thing was like don't burn bridges and leave on good terms versus disappearing.
Yeah, it makes sense. What are you hoping to do in the future of your e-fedding career?
Really excited to do Defiance. Really excited to help write some matches for WrestleFest for EWC. Like, I don't have a match this year, but I'm writing two of the biggest matches on the show. So that'll be cool. And then I've heard rumors of another project of putting an end on a story in relations to Asylum. So if that happens, I'll be super excited to do that.
There you go. A couple goals. This one's from Tone. Do you smoke Lucky Strikes?
No, those are disgusting and gross.
Dwayne's back. You were in Feds with great artwork. Who made the best posers, micros, etc.?
Best poser is really hard to say because everybody has their own style to it, and that was something that was like I used to do poser, so seeing everybody go from like this like trying to be hyper realistic to developing their own style of artwork was really cool. Like Joe did this like super gritty, like he would like take your characters and like morph them almost. Like Token, he made him look like a shark almost. Like he had like these features that were like the long pointed nose, like very, very shark like. And I thought that was cool. I think the guy Lee Best does Howl's posers right now. Those are the best I've ever seen.
They're so crazy.
They're nuts. But like back in the day, like on Real Skater, this dude used to do his own textures and sell them on the Poser texture website. That dude was incredible. Travis made incredible artwork. Anybody who could do their own textures was hands down great. And anybody who had 3D modeling software that could do their own props was even better.
There you go. Yeah, there's some crazy stuff out there. I mean, regardless of what kind of efetting you're into, whether it's poser, micro, or pick base, I mean, what people do with graphics and PSDs of pick base is crazy too.
Yeah, no, and you look at like EWC stuff, like as somebody who came from like these crazy artwork feds to EWC, like the poster artwork and stuff Mac does, it stands up against any of those. The only difference is he uses pick bases.
That's it.
Like, yeah, like I prefer poser over everything, but whatever you do, like
that's right. Next one's from Tone. Have you ever burst someone's eardrum with your voice?
Apparently yes.
Oh, really?
We were all on Discord one night, and I guess I might have had a few too many, and I may have yelled into the microphone, and Anna had already hurt her ear that day, so I don't think I was the direct cause, but they blame me for it.
Well, be careful with those Mountain Dews. Don't have too many.
Yeah, Mountain Dews definitely.
All right, last one from Tone. How difficult is it for your brain to flip from writing and how you normally do writing? Hold on, one more time. How difficult is it for your brain to flip from writing how you normally do to writing Claybird and his dialect?
So I told you Claybird's a Texan, and whenever I made the character, I actually took a lot of inspiration from the Flying Frenchie. Have you ever read any of Frenchie's?
I have not.
Mikey? So Frenchie speaks like with this heavy, heavy French accent, and everything he types, like there's a very specific way Kevin wrote that character and used certain words. Like you could, if you tried to write Frenchie, or I tried to write Frenchie right now, I couldn't do it, and I wouldn't do it justice the way Kevin did because he never messed it up. So I wanted to do that with a Texas like Southern dialect and like that Southern accent, and I wanted to write the character that way. Some people say it's really annoying, but to me, it breaks the immersion on the character if I don't have it. Like whenever I'm reading it, like if Clay says something normal, that's wrong. Like that's not going to be the way he says it. But it's really hard to flip back and forth, and I have to listen to like a ton of country music to get my head in the right mind space, like the right brain space to be able to write this. Like I have to hear that twang over and over and over again to write that character. And it's cool because I found some cool country music eventually, but originally it was really hard. It sucked. Garth Brooks is
terrible. Finally, we got Roland. Brock, if the Asylum was in today's time, would you still name your character Token Weed?
No. Actually, I thought about changing the character's name at one point. The character's real name is Sean Williams, And I was going to just kind of kill the Token Weed moniker off and just not use it. But there was a handler in the PTC community whose name was Sean Williams, spelled exactly like my character was. And he came into FWO later, and the dude was a killer writer. R.I.P. Sean. Like, that dude was awesome. He passed away a couple of years ago. But I was going to switch to that, and I couldn't because, yeah.
Makes sense. Roland also wants to know, why would Token Weed be dead now?
Probably because Des Aragorn killed him because I was drunk one night, or because he did a whole bunch of heroin, or because the guy has been shot, stabbed, mutilated, like everything you can think of. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of reasons the character could be dead, and most of the Asylum characters should be dead. Like, I'd say the fact any Cheetos in Brazen right now is a miracle in itself. That guy should be dead too. Like, just because the people he hung out with, somebody should have killed that guy. Like, somebody should be outside his house right now waiting to kill him.
What are some other fight characters that you have in the back of your head?
I haven't really thought like the fight character game through. There's not really a lot of places that have done that anymore, or want to do it in the way we did it.
Yeah, everybody's going
really,
MMA Fed now.
Yeah, and there were a couple of those that were around, but like the drama you can build up in an MMA fight it's not the same that you could in we had a 10 count, we had a ring out rule where that you could lose the match if you got knocked out of the ring, but the violence in the 10 count, like, you think about a move that's going to put somebody down for 10, it's almost impossible. So you just have these like just vicious matches. They'd end with like, somebody like crucifying a character in barbed wire and beating them to death, like half to death with a chair, and then hitting their finisher. Like that was how you could get a 10 count.
Incredible. Yeah, no, I haven't seen many of those around. I know High Octane Wrestling is reopening their HOFC division, which is a fighting division. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that'll be cool. I'd love to see another fighting place open that was like dark and twisted and wrong, and it'd be cool.
Well, very good, Brock. That's what we got for you. Before I let you go, is there anything else you want to plug, promote, put over, or give us some web addresses?
EWC's website, WrestleFest is right around the corner. It's probably one of the coolest shows since FWO Countdown. They do live results 3 days, and the card's huge. It's 4 days of matches. There's people, they rate segments all day. The Discord's like absolutely popping that day. So it's a really, really, really fun event. People should definitely check it out.
Definitely. Last year's event was huge. It was awesome, and I did some reading on it, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, like they do like these crazy like what is it, like the food trucks where like the legends like run the food trucks, and it's just such a random thing, but it lets you see the Fed's history, and the Fed's been around for like ever, like the dawn of time. The EWC, like the whole time all this other stuff was happening, somewhere the EWC was just off doing its thing for 20 some years. So it's a really cool place. And then DefianceWrestling.com. I don't think I've hit my quota yet, so let's say that like 3 or 4 more times.
DefianceWrestling.com.
Brian, can you hit me with one? And then
DefianceWrestling.com.
Awesome. Well, Brock, this was a lot of fun, buddy. I had a great time interviewing you. I appreciate you taking the time, and it was a lot of fun learning more about you.
Yeah, man, thank you. Hopefully I didn't ramble too much, and I wasn't as incoherent as I think I was.
No, I think this was a great interview.
Well, you're just saying that because we're on the mic right now. You're going to go talk to Brian later and be like, it's terrible.
In 3, 2, no. No, it was a lot of fun, but appreciate you joining us.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Now, that was a fun interview. Really enjoyed talking to Brock. Want to thank him for taking the time to come on and tell us about him, his history, and what's going on today. Make sure you check him out in DefianceWrestling.com, as our faithful followers know. Make sure you check out all of our sponsors. Make sure you check out EWTs. Guys, thanks for checking out the Efed podcast. 2020 has been a wild year between pandemics, Efeds, and wildness. It has been crazy. But through it all, we've dropped an episode every week, and we're happy to say that we're going to be going again next year for 2021. Stay tuned. Keep your ears peeled. Episode 59 will be dropping sometime in January 21, and we'll be going weekly once again every week from there on out. I appreciate everyone who's taken the time to listen. We appreciate all of our patrons over at patreon.com/EFED podcast. Appreciate all of our customers over at EWTs.com. We appreciate all of the support from everybody in our community. It's been a fun run, and we cannot wait to see what happens next. So from us here at the EFED podcast, from Brian, from myself, thank you very much for listening in 2020. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year to everyone out there. We'll see you in 21 on the EFED podcast, where the wrestling is written,
but the characters are real.
The Efed podcast, only on the Atomic Jobcast Network, presented commercial free on Patreon.